हेलो गाइस, वेलकम टू धन। आज हम बात करेंगे चार्जेस के बारे में। सो व्हाट आर अकाउंट ओपनिंग एंड ईएमसी चार्जेस? So there are no account opening and EMC charges. What are demat related charges? If any stock is credited to your demat account, there is no charge at all. The charge is only when you either sell it or pledge it. If you sell a stock, we need to move that particular stock out of your demat to give you the sell benefit of 80% of the sell value, which you can use for further trading or investing. So for every such single transaction, there is a charge of rupees 12.5 and GST. What are the auto square off charges? If you place an intraday order, it gets squared off after a few minutes before the market closure. In this scenario, if the trade is auto squared off, we charge rupees 20 plus GST. What are call and trade charges? If you wish to call and trade, there is a charge of rupees 50 plus GST per order. What is the interest charge for an MTF order? For an MTF order, we charge 0.0438% interest per day for an outstanding MTF funding value. The outstanding funding value changes daily due to margin movement, and this interest is computed daily and posted weekly into your ledger. What is the margin interest charge? If you have an open position which require furnishing of margin, you can provide that margin with at least 50% of the cash or cash equivalent, which includes cash, GSEC, SGB, liquid ETFs, etc. And the remaining non-cash you can provide by using stocks. In any scenario, if the cash is not maintained at 50%, then there is an interest charge of 0.0438% per day. Do you charge any amount for funds pay-in? No, we do not charge any amount in case you do a pay-in of funds via UPI or net banking. Now, let us talk about the transaction charges or the trade-related charges for equity trades. Let's suppose you place a buy delivery order on BSE and the order value is 1 lakh. So in that case, as you know, we do not charge any brokerage for delivery orders. The transaction charges for BSE are 0.00375%, STT comes out to be 0.1%, SEBI fees 0.0001%, stamp duty 0.015%, and IPFT contribution again 0.0001%. Now, there's a GST which is applicable on the brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees, and the IPFT contribution. So just to summarize, for an order of rupees 1 lakh done under delivery in the BSE exchange, you pay up 119.66 rupees as the transaction charges. Now, similarly, if you do an MTF trade in BSE segment with the same trade value of 1 lakh, here we do charge a brokerage. The brokerage in this case is the minimum of 0.03% of the trade value or 20 rupees. So here, as you can see, for 1 lakh, 0.03% would be 30 rupees. And as we said, it's minimum of either 30 or 20. So we charge rupees 20 as brokerage. Again, the transaction charge remains the same at 0.00375%, STT 0.1%, SEBI fees 0.001%, stamp duty 0.015%, IPFT contribution again 0.0001%, and GST, which is applicable again on the brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees, and IPFT contribution. So in this case, if you do a 1 lakh buy order under MTF, you pay up around 143.26 rupees as charges. Now let's say suppose you do this transaction on the NSE exchange. In this case, all other charges remains the same except the transaction charges. As you know, the transaction charges are subject to exchange. In BSE, the transaction charges were 0.00375%. On the contrary, in NSE, the transaction charges are 0.00322%. In this case, for both the orders, the charges would be 119.04 rupees and 142.64 rupees respectively. As you can see, there is a very minimalistic difference just because of the transaction charges difference in both the exchange. What are the charges on intraday orders? Now, let us assume you buy shares in the BSE exchange for rupees 1 lakh and sell them again at the trade value of 1 lakh. So in this case, on both the legs, brokerage of rupees 20 would be applicable, transaction charges as 0.00375% would be applicable, STT would be applicable only on the sell orders, and hence 0.025 STT on the sell order will be computed. SEBI fees would be computed on both the orders, stamp duty only on the buy order, and IPFT contribution again on both the orders would be computed. So in this case, the total charges comes out to be rupees 31.26 for buy side and rupees 53.26 on the sell side, which adds them for the entire intraday order, the total charge would be rupees 84.52. Similarly, if you do the same transactions in NSE, everything else would remain the same except for the transaction charges. The transaction charges would be 0.0032 in both the exchanges, which will be applicable on both the legs, as just like BSE, and here the total charges for the buy side would be 30.64 and on the sell side it would be 52.64. If you add them together, the total charges would be 83.27 rupees. Again, as you can see, there is a very minimalistic difference while doing trades between NSE and BSE. That's only because of the transaction charges difference. What are the charges in futures and options? Now let's start with the futures segment. In futures segment for both the exchanges, the order value is anywhere between rupees 7 lakh to rupees 14 lakh. So let's take an example in BSE. In BSE, you bought a future in which the contract value is of rupees 8 lakh. So here the brokerage would be applicable as rupees 20. As we said, the brokerage is minimum of 0.03% of the trade value or 20. However, in case of futures, 0.03% of contract value will always be higher than 20, and hence in futures you'll always be charged a brokerage of rupees 20 per order. It's an important point to note here that there are no transaction charges as of now in BSE exchange. So here you won't be paying any transaction charges for any futures trade that you do on the BSE. However, in case of BSE, only the index futures are liquid, whereas the stock futures are not liquid. For the buy leg, as you can see, there's no STT. SEBI fees is 0.01%. Stamp duty at 0.02%, IPFT contribution again at 0.0001%, and GST, which is applicable on brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution, which brings total charges of rupees 41.49 on the buy side. Now let's say suppose you sell a futures contract worth rupees 8 lakh in BSE. So in this case, you would be charged rupees 20 as brokerage. There won't be any transaction charges as mentioned earlier. STT would be applicable at 0.0125%, SEBI fees at 0.0001%. There won't be any stamp duty because stamp duty is applicable only on the buy leg. IPFT contribution as 0.0001% and GST, which will be applicable on the brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution, which brings your total charges to be 125.49. As you can see, for a sell order on the futures side, the charges would always be more than the buy side because of the major contributor as STT. Now let's talk about the NSE. In NSE, let's say suppose you bought a futures contract of rupees 10 lakh. So the brokerage applicable would be rupees 20. Transaction charges are not waived off in NSE and hence transaction charges computed at 0.00188% would be applicable. STT won't be applicable on the buy side, so 0 STT. SEBI fees would be 0.0001%, stamp duty as 0.002%, IPFT contribution 0.0001%, and GST, which is applicable on brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution, which brings your total charges to be 64.14 rupees. Similarly, if you sell a contract worth 10 lakhs on the NSE exchange, you'll be charged a brokerage of rupees 20, transaction charges same as 0.00188%, STT of 0.0125%, SEBI fees of 0.0001%, there won't be any stamp duty, IPFT 0.0001%, GST as 18% again on brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution, which brings your total charges to be 173.14 rupees. Here you can see the total charges on the sell side are almost double than that of the buy side. Again due to the contributing factor of STT, which is applicable on the sell side but not on the buy side. Now let's talk about the charges in options trading. In options trading, both the exchanges NSE and BSE have standardized their charges. So the charges in both the exchanges would be same. So assume you bought an options contract by paying a premium of rupees 5,000 in either of the exchange. The charges would be brokerage 20 rupees, transaction charges 0.0495%, STT won't be applicable because it's a buy order, SEBI fees as 0.0001%, stamp duty would be 0.003% of the premium. Again here this value would be 0 because of the rounding off factor, IPFT contribution as 0.0005% and GST, which will be applicable on brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution. This brings the total charges to be around rupees 26.56. Similarly, if you do a sell transaction, let's say suppose you sold an options contract wherein you received a premium of rupees 6,000. Here the brokerage would be rupees 20, transaction charges as 0.0495%. STT will be applicable here because it's a sell order, which is 0.0625% and rounded off to the nearest rupee. SEBI fees as 0.0001%. Stamp duty again would be 0 because it's a sell order. IPFT contribution 0.0005%. GST again on brokerage, transaction charges, SEBI fees and IPFT contribution, which brings the total charges to be 31.15 rupees. Let's talk about the charges on commodities segment. So commodities are currently trading majorly on the MCX exchange. Here, let's suppose you buy a commodity future of rupees 8 lakh as trade value. Here, the brokerage charge would be rupees 20. Transaction charges would be 0.0026%. Here, since it is the buy order, the CTT would be 0, similar as STT. SEBI fees would be 0.0001%. Stamp duty as 0.002% and GST, which will be applicable on brokerage, transaction charges and SEBI fees. Do note that in MCX there is no IPFT contribution. So in the buy order, your total charges would be rupees 65.09. Let's suppose you sell a commodity futures of rupees 8 lakhs. Here the brokerage would be rupees 20. The transaction charges would be 0.0026%. Here CTT would be charged at 0.01%, SEBI fees 0.0001%. There won't be any stamp duty because it's a sell side order, and GST would be applicable as 18% on brokerage, transaction charges and SEBI fees. So the total charges would be around 129.09 rupees. Now again, similar like future, you can see the charges on the sell order are comparatively higher than the buy order. Now let's talk about the charges in commodities options. So let's say suppose you buy a options contract by paying a premium of rupees 5,000. Here the brokerage charge would be rupees 20. Transaction charges would be 0.05%. There won't be any CTT here. SEBI fees would be 0.0001%. Stamp duty 0.0003%. And GST will be applicable on brokerage, transaction charges and SEBI fees. So here, the total charges that you pay is rupees 26.71. Similarly, let's say suppose you sold an options contract in MCX by receiving a premium of rupees 8,000. Here, the brokerage payable would be rupees 20. Transaction charges at 0.05%. CTD here would be applicable because it's a sell side order and this would be 0.05%. SEBI fees flat at 0.0001%. There won't be any stamp duty because it's a sell side order. GST would be applicable on brokerage, transaction charges and SEBI fees. This comes out as total charges of 32.33 rupees. Thank you so much for watching this video. These were about the general charges on trading side and some general charges on Dhan. In case you have more questions, you can write in the comment section below and our team will be happy to answer them. अगर आपको वीडियो पसंद आया तो प्लीज लाइक कीजिए, सब्सक्राइब कीजिए. Thank you so much.
Investments in the securities market are subject to market risk. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.